When I was thinking about this, I was trying to get my head around, what this topic really is. And I know we're going to get to the kind of, I'm going to call it narrower view of collective agreements and, where that language will take us and how we actually negotiate these things. But for my part, what I'd like to do is maybe capture the big picture, and then I'm going to hand it over. We'll talk a little bit about collective agreements, some work that's been done in the country. We do have Morgan Cooper here. We can talk about things here locally. So I titled mine, Recognizing and Rewarding the Scholarship of Engagement. And then I thought about the words that I used. We have a definition for engagement at this university. There's been a lot of work on that. There's a big panel. And all of those discussions brought up, okay, this recognition has to happen. And then we quickly jumped to P&T. There are other things as a piece of that, and I think we should recognize that. And what happens in a collective agreement and what happens on the ground are also different things. So there's wording currently around P&T, which would provide a format for all kinds of things to happen, and does happen in different units. But we'll need to figure out how we move forward. So clearly we want more recognition. I wrote down sort of what is it as the first question for me. What is this engagement thing? I talked about collaboration between institutional resources and those outside the university to study, address, and/or resolve issues, challenges facing the external group as a starting point. So I think, we have these things that we're interested in internally, and somebody from outside may come in and help us with it, but mostly these are challenges on the outside, and we're mobilizing some resources, and I didn't even put professors, although that's probably largely what we're thinking of in this context. And I wrote down the bullet that it should be mutually beneficial. And so when I think about this engagement piece, that's what I thought of. I also made a reference to myself just to remember that I'm drawing from a document that C. Jordan put together back in 2007, and I have a detailed reference if anybody wants to get that. But it was just a way of, I guess, getting my head around some of the main points that are there. We do a lot I'm in the engineering faculty, so we're a fairly applied science, and a lot of the activity I've been involved with is involving external partners, but it's often more outreach than what I think we're talking about when we talk about engagement. So for definition purposes, I'm going to say outreach is more of a one-way communication rather than an exchange of knowledge between the two parties. All right, so when we go and help some company with something, we're probably just going, and that's just outreach. We're not having that true engagement between the two of us. Engagement implies more of a partnership or mutual recognition of expertise and shared decision making. So that's how I've tried to frame some of that. And we're, almost everything we mentioned in those long discussions we had about engagement, from volunteerism to recruitment, going out to a high school or going out to a kindergarten and talking about the university, they're all engaging the community in some way, but I don't think they were what we meant when we're talking about this scholarship of engagement. And then I was thinking about the word scholarship, and it seems to me we're probably going to have to get some definitions around what that means to us. So I jotted down some bullets, and you can either jot them down or throw buttons or whatever works for you. But I'm thinking when we're talking about scholarship, it usually implies that there's somebody here in this game has some significant expertise. And when I think of engagement, normally there's at least domain expertise and contextual expertise. They won't necessarily be split up into the community and the researcher, but those two things are probably critical. So I leave those words out there for us to think about when we get into our discussion. Normally it would involve either a new approach or innovation or a new application context. Maybe people could come up with other ways of looking at it, but that's when I was reflecting. For it to be scholarship, it has to be documented, and it should be something that can be replicated, and it should be something that we can build on. Right? So those are elements that we would look for to say, yes, this is scholarship. There are many other things that we should do and we continue to do that don't fit that definition, but I don't think they would be recognized as scholarship. It should be reviewed in some way, and I'm being cautious there about what that would be, and it should have impact or be significant and is of interest to others. So that's 4 or 5 bullets that I put together. So when I talked about scholarship, I think those are the things that I think we should be looking for. And I threw that out for myself because I found I was talking about everything that we do with external partners, and there's a whole myriad of them that really don't match up to this idea of engaging scholarship. So it isn't simply making your expertise available to somebody else or volunteering. It isn't simply service to the community, although service to the community should be recognized, right? So a lot of things that we do in terms of service to the community may in fact be covered under our P&T category of service, right? I'm totally for them. I'm a big fan, but I doubt that those things are going to replace the professional scholarship that we currently look at internally. And it isn't a letter of support for a proposal or accessing data from an external partner. Like there's some really straightforward things that happen all the time, but those are not, I think, what we're talking about in this new model. Okay, then I identified some challenges, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sandy. So the challenges that I saw from where I sit, and again, I sit in a faculty of engineering. My background is engineering and farming. All right, identifying suitable forms of documentation or evidence, right? So that typically, or I guess probably typically, would not be a journal paper. It might be a journal paper, but what are the suitable, appropriate ways to document or provide evidence of this scholarship of engagement? Determining quality and significance. So let's say that we had something going. How do we determine if it's any good and if it matters to somebody? I am always challenged when I think of a comprehensive university and one collective agreement, how we accommodate the differences between faculties and even between departments within a faculty. We're very, very different. We look at the world in different ways, so the language has to support those different ways of interacting with communities. And if you've heard me other times, you'll know that I actually think that the whole structure of these narrow things is a problem, because engagement problems will never be defined by department. They'll always be just a problem, and then everything, the sociology or engineering will have to come in as it's needed. The existing culture of faculty involved in a collegial process will be a challenge for us, right? So right now, our collective agreement lets us do a lot of things, as do the NSERC. I'm not as familiar with SHRC. The SHRC panels, they could decide totally differently how they give out awards, but they don't, because we have a culture. So having us behave differently will be a challenge, even if we change the rules, because P&T committees, for anybody not familiar, are made up of faculty. And then finally, collective agreement, intent, and terminology will have to be addressed. And that gets me to my dear colleague.
I was interested in this topic because when I was the director of the School of Nursing, of course, and of course I had previously sat on promotion and tenure, well, I'd gone through promotion and tenure reviews myself. I then sat as a member of promotion and tenure committees, and then when I was the director of the school, I had to either I would be given a recommendation about promotion and tenure by our search committee or our P&T committee, and then I would have to make a recommendation to the vice president academic. So I've sort of seen it through a variety of lenses. And when I was the director of the School of Nursing, there would be files that would come across my desk that would not quite fit the, or let's just say our promotion and tenure committee were fairly narrow in their interpretation of the collective agreement and what fit, let's say, under scholarship. And this was becoming more and more challenging because more and more of our faculty, I'm from a nursing faculty, a lot of our faculty do a whole variety of things with the community all the time. I mean, we're very engaged with different patient-client groups. We have faculty who go, who have international projects, and they don't quite fit under the traditional models of what a scholarship product is at the end. A journal paper, you know, a research proposal that's funded and so on. Sometimes they were working with community groups where it was the community group that got a bit of funding because the faculty member helped them with a proposal and they got the funding. So there were, and then there were other situations where faculty members were involved in international work. They had worked with the public health agency in a particular country and had been doing teaching around, let's say, immunization or HIV. But where did you put that? Was it teaching? Was it scholarship? Was it service? And they didn't particularly make a good argument for themselves in their own letters about how the P&T committee should think about what they did. So the language, the way we are thinking about public engagement and involvement, I think is a struggle for all of us because we hardly know how to frame it in ourselves. So one of the things that I happen to be able to draw on is that there's a group of universities across Canada, I think there are 8, Rob, who have been working for a couple of years related to community engaged scholarship and trying to find out what do we mean by that, how are we going to make it count in the academy, because if we want public engagement to be a pillar for the university, it's going to have traction. It can't be just because it's a nice thing to do. You know, professors and students are driven by achievement, and there needs to be some way of acknowledging that work as they move forward with promotion and tenure. So this group of people from these 8 universities, at this university was Rob Greenwood, Doreen Neville, Stephen Bornstein, and myself. And I must say, I have not been an active member of this group for a while, so none of this is my work, but I actually have access to some of the work. But what's interesting is that they put out a paper in October, just this past October, because they did a review of 16 universities and 3 colleges in Canada, looking at the language that was in promotion and tenure documents and in collective agreements around the language of what they called community engaged scholarship. In our case, we would think of it as publicly engaged scholarship. But they were just looking at what's going on in the rest of Canada. So they looked at collective agreements, tenure and promotion documents, and faculty policies and guidelines, because we know that sometimes collective agreements allow individual faculties and schools to develop more specific criteria or guidelines for their own promotion and tenure committees. They also looked at the general websites of these universities. Here's what they found. In most cases, the collective agreements do not make a precise mention of community engaged scholarship. Some of them just recognize the essence of the relationship of the university with the community, while some do not place any emphasis at all on community engagement. Also, there might be a general indication of the role of faculty members in community initiatives, but there's no evidence of this in the policies and procedures for faculty assessments and evaluation. What they did find was that some particular units at some universities might have more specific language, for example, health-related faculties, or interestingly, agriculture. But in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is our collective agreement is obviously not much different. We don't have specific language, as far as I know, in our own collective agreement. Our collective agreement is broad, and so in some ways, broad is good. That might allow us to be able to think about some of the activities that we're doing around public engagement and publicly engaged scholarship in ways that allow, like our collective agreement might allow for that. It's the interpretation of the language sometimes and the culture that says scholarship means you've got to have your 3 published papers or your X number of conference presentations, and they all got to kind of look the same. It doesn't matter if you're in nursing or the English department or in psychology. So that's where I leave it. So I think the onus is on us to say, what do we want to do around promotion and tenure and this whole notion of publicly engaged scholarship and how that's going to be recognized in the university?